Kia ora tātou. Has everybody got a seat? Councillor Cooper? What? We're just waiting for everybody to take their seats, please. Kia ora tātou. Before we commence our meeting, I would like to invite Denise Harper to do a karakia, please, for us. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou katoa, tēnā koe te me tēnei tukuna mai kiau, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia karakia tātou, kia tau mai ngā manaakitanga te me ngāra ki rongo ki tēnei o tātou. Kia mahia te hua mai kihiki, kia koe te aroha, toi te mana, toi te reo Māori, toi te o tātou nei kaunihera kia tūturu a whiti whakamaua kia tīna. Haumi e hui e, tā ki e, tēnā tātou.
Kia ora, Denise. Welcome. We've got a full house here today, this afternoon, for our council meeting of the 20th of June 2024. Welcome to members of the public who've come today to discuss this one important issue we've got on our agenda this afternoon. Welcome to councillors, community board members, staff, and everybody who's online as well. Welcome to this meeting. I would like now to invite Councillor Halliday to do the council blessing in English, please.
3, Madam Chair. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. We now move to apologies. I have an apology from Kim Tahiwi, Ngāhapu Ōtaki, and Denise is here in her place today. I note that Councillor Sophie Hanford is on a leave of absence. Do I have a mover for that apology for Kim? I moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Pravanov. All in favour? Aye. That's carried. Any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda today? There don't appear to be any. So we now move on to item 5, public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. What I'm going to do today is I'm just going to move forward the introduction to the report we have on our agenda today, just so that we have an introduction from council staff about what it is we're considering today, so that we provide some context about the things that people are going to be talking to us today about. So I'll just preamble that by just saying that what we've got today is a... Can we have some more volume? Okay, so we'll lean into our microphones today, people. Can you hear that okay? Great. It's quite loud here at the table. It's a long way to the back of the room there, so it can be hard to hear. If you do have any difficulties with hearing, we do have a hearing loop available in the council chamber, so just raise your hand and the Democracy Services will be able to help anybody with that. So I'll now, what I was in the middle of saying is I'm just going to move the introduction to the report that we have on our agenda forward today, just not the whole introduction, but just ask staff to provide a little context around what it is we're considering today, just to make sure all our public speakers know exactly what it is that we're looking to achieve with this report today, which is about receiving the Takutai Kapiti report rather than making any decisions around the use of it or anything like that. So I'll just pass to Chris Purvin to say a few words and then I'll move on to public speaking. Thank you.
Kia ora. So I think to give that opening, I'll just note to you that We have 4 recommendations we're seeking from Council today. The first, as the Mayor has noted, is to receive the Coastal Advisory Panel's recommendation report. I just want to note that receiving the report does not mean that we're making any decisions on the recommendations. We are merely accepting or receiving that the report has been completed, so that's tabled. We will be asking Council to acknowledge and thank the Coastal Advisory Panel and the team around that for the work that was completed. We are confirming that the work that was initiated around the Takutai Kapiti project is now completed, so it is finished. And lastly, we are asking, or we're seeking feedback from, firstly, the Insurance Council of New Zealand regarding some of the points that are noted in the Coastal Advisory Panel's report. So we'd like some feedback around what their thoughts are on those things. And secondly, to get feedback from the Department of Conservation around our obligations under the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement around taking a 100-year perspective. And part of the reason that we've focused on those 2 areas is because we have had feedback from people around concerns about some of those points, so we wanted to make sure we'd taken those forward. We will discuss that further as we work through our paper later in the agenda.
Yes, I'd just like to note too that we have some of the Coastal Advisory Panel members online today listening. We've got Don Day, Martin Manning and Moira Potama online. So I'll now move to public speaking time, and the first person I have on my list is Tanya Lees on behalf of CALM. So as Tanya, you're representing an organisation, you have 5 minutes to speak today. Individuals will have 3 minutes. I'd please invite people to raise new points. We don't want a lot of repetition. If somebody's made the point really well already that you're about to make, we don't need to hear it again, particularly unless you feel like you have something new to add, because we've got quite a few public speakers to get through today. So Tanya, welcome. You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
I think that's it. Okay.
Just when you're ready.
Some of these points you've probably heard before because we have to keep saying them. So, good afternoon to the Mayor, Chief Executive, key council staff and councillors present here today. CALM would like to reiterate our position on the Coastal Advisory Panel and its work on the coastal adaptation process. We categorically reject their findings which are presented to you today. Our concerns relate to the lack of community engagement, the extreme climate modelling and the unnecessary harm this is already having on the Kapiti community. House values, significant insurance increases and insurance refusal, these factors combined with a recession, high housing costs, a looming rates increase and small businesses struggling to stay afloat are causing undue stress for most of us, and now our private property rights are under threat, all under the guise of climate change fear-mongering. The science is not settled and there is no consensus. CAP's continued reluctance to hear these other scientific points of view would suggest a predetermined outcome. In fact, there is a lack of solid evidence for the climate emergency, which the Council declared in May 2019, citing a United Nations narrative, which is highly disputed by many credible scientists, both here in New Zealand and internationally. To be clear, CALM does agree that existing infrastructure should be protected and maintained, for example, seawalls and drainage, and steps should be taken to mitigate coastal erosion. We do not, however, believe the sea levels are rising significantly and we will all be flooded. CALM categorically dispute that CAP consulted extensively with the community. Public meetings were not adequately advertised by Council, and as a result, there were very poor attendance rates. There has been a reluctance to organise community meetings in order to share information about the Takutai Kapiti process. Finally, after being tipped off by fellow residents, 200 people showed up for the Raumati meeting and openly and for the most part collectively questioned the CAP work. Thereafter, the format of future meetings was changed. As if in an effort to prevent members of the community uniting and standing against the CAP process, suddenly we had to register to attend a meeting which was capped at 60 people. There would be Zoom meetings, which never eventuated. Then Council announced meetings would consist of small drop-in sessions. CALM has held 3 public meetings now to help inform the community, despite receiving no funding. The last one was almost a full house at Southwoods with around 450 attendees. This was Council's job, not ours. Yet there still continues to be a large percentage of residents completely unaware of this process. CAP have relied on the Jacobs report, which is fundamentally flawed. Firstly, there is no contract or terms of reference between Jacobs and the Kapiti Coast District Council, which is a serious red flag. Why pay $250,000 of ratepayers' money to a global company without a contract? Incidentally, Jacobs' US parent company is involved in the management and operation of the Nevada National Security Site, which maintains facilities related to nuclear weapon stockpiling. New Zealand still continues to be nuclear-free and participates in the global partnership against weapons of mass destruction. The Jacobs report uses worst-case scenario climate modelling of SSP/RCP 8.5, which, as we know, the IPCC has said is implausible, and operates on the premise that future coal production will be 6 times the rate it is now. The report doesn't take seawalls into account and is based on a rocky shore, yet we have a sandy and in many parts a Cretan coastline. Historical records were not used. Originally, the Jacobs report was peer-reviewed by the Greater Wellington Regional Council and Becker, which is hardly an independent study, especially since the latter has recently conducted a climate change impact assessment report of Wellington. The lines are blurred between the Technical Advisory Group, CAP, and the Council, which creates a lack of accountability. The Technical Advisory Group is also heavily weighted with Jacobs and Council representatives as advisors, which is a conflict of interest. Central and local government cannot fund a process on this scale. So far, the ratepayers have paid well in excess of $4 million for the Takutai Kapiti process. We simply cannot afford to spend more. If implemented, managed retreat would be in excess of $1 billion. In the cultural assessment component, the local iwis, with one exception, have all recommended managed retreat as the preferred option. In proposed legislation, people with Māori ancestry receive preferential treatment, which is promoting co-governance leading to racial disharmony. To date, CAP's data has been complex and confusing, especially the pathway options, and even economists and accountants have struggled to understand the information presented to them. If these recommendations are voted on and passed, the Council could potentially be subject to legal action, with ratepayers ultimately having to pay the court costs just to protect their own property rights. And speaking of legalities, where is the second legal opinion relating to the removal of hazard notices on all limbs in the Kapiti district that our community was promised 5 weeks ago at the CALM meeting on the 14th of May? CALM strongly advocates that the Kapiti Coast District Council acts in the best interests of the community and rejects the CAP recommendations. Residents and ratepayers that we represent do not want them looming over us indefinitely, as they are already causing stress and uncertainty. Therefore, CALM would like to see a decision made on the recommendations within a month. In the event the CAP report is accepted, CALM will pursue options to challenge this proposal every step of the way on behalf of the many who stand with us. In closing, we say to the elected officials before us today, use your position wisely. Based on your actions, your position as a councillor may be over come election time next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? There don't appear to be any. Thank you very much for your presentation
Thank
today,
you.
Tanya. And next I have Isabel Malarat. Isabel?
Can't hear. Can't hear. Can't hear. Thank God here.
Tanya's just asked that I table her speech, so can I leave that here?
And just leave
Thank
that
you.
there. That'll be picked up. Thank you.
Righty ho. Sorry, I couldn't hear you before. as we've been asked not to be repetitive, that sort of takes out most of my speech. But
If you feel like you need to reiterate it, feel free.
I will
That's
read
fine.
most of it because I have attended other community meetings and spoken to Chris Purvan, written to Chris Purvan directly on this, so I would like to read it. Well, most of it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I would also like to thank the other speakers and community members who've turned up today in support. My name is Isabel Malloray and I'm speaking here today as a resident and a homeowner of 30 years on the Kapiti Coast. I would like to take this time to give some feedback regarding the recently released CAP recommendations in respect to community engagement. As noted repeatedly through the recommendations, community engagement was to be forefront of the process. To quote Mr. Bolger, our core responsibility has, I believe, remained intact to gather community input comprehensively and reflect their perspectives in our report to the Council. The next bit was going to be about my encounter with community engagement, which Tanya has already spoken about with regards to the 200 people at Raumeti, so I won't go over that again. I wrote to Chris Purvan and attended 3 community board meetings at which I stated my concerns and gave compelling reasons to retain in-person community group meetings. This was not to be, and in fact the Zoom meetings didn't eventuate either. The only reasonable community engagement after the Paikokariki workshop was in the form of the Raumeti Community Board, who arranged for 4 of the CAP members to attend a public meeting, present their information and be available for some Q&A at the end. That was the only time I would consider there was any resemblance of true community engagement. So now the final report from CAP. When I read it, I had to admit that I felt quite annoyed. I felt annoyed because it was so full of praise for the amazing community engagement that had taken place. I felt incensed when I read, we highly value the feedback received from high school students. High school students who have little to no worldly experience and don't pay rates. There was no mention of highly valuing the residents and ratepayers who have worked most of their lives, paid taxes, paid rates, and contributed to society and the community. There was also respect, thanks, gratitude, and gratefulness expressed to the iwi groups who they consulted with, but again, little or no thanks to the general public. I found the process discriminatory towards people who have challenged or offered alternative views or information, or have dared to seek a wider community engagement. There are many intelligent, caring and knowledgeable people in our community that deserve to be heard. To conclude, I ask Council to reject the CAP recommendations as they have not satisfactorily fulfilled their premise of gathering community input comprehensively and reflecting their perspectives, and have failed in fair and proper community engagement. I also ask Council to stop any further work on this process, stop wasting ratepayers' money, $4 million to date and counting. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
I'd like to table mine as well, thanks.
Thank you, Isabel. Are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Just very quickly, in defence of high school students, their input into every policy that we have is always welcome.
I understand that, but what I don't understand how they're given such high importance given the rest of the community hasn't.
Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you.
Now, somebody had a petition. Was that you, Isabel?
Yes, I did send the petition. Hopefully the Chief
So
Executive...
have you got it to table it today, please?
Yes. Yep.
Yep.
I can do
You
that
could
now.
do that now. Yeah, that'd be great.
Can I say something quickly about it?
Yes, you can speak to that now if you like.
Sorry, just wasn't sure of the process for this.
Yeah, we're not very familiar with it either, so we're just playing it by ear.
Okay, so this was a covering letter that we sent to Darren Edwards, and apologies, it was late, and there seemed to be a problem with receiving it, but he is in receipt of it now.
Yeah, that's no problem. I decided to accept it whenever it came, as long as it was before today. So
Thank
all
you.
good.
So just quickly, it was only a very short petition. Please accept this petition to be tabled at the council meeting on Thursday the 20th of June 2024, signed by 887 residents, ratepayers, property owners of the Kapiti Coast District Council in support of the following. The Takatau Kapiti Coastal Advisory Panel process in Kapiti is based on predetermined outcomes, a flawed process and implausible science. Therefore, the signatories to this petition ask for the following. The Kapiti Coast District Council reject the Coastal Advisory Panel's recommendations report. The Kapiti Coast District Council stop the Coastal Adaptation Pathways process, and that no more money is spent. But at the bottom, please note that the signatures provided are, to the best of our knowledge, those of residents, ratepayers and property owners of the Kapiti Coast.
Thank you very much. And staff will take that now and bring it down to me. Dean Harris. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you. Everyone read the report? 120 odd pages. Well, I got 157, I read every one of them. So it's quite interesting, which I'd like to highlight some of the aspects of it. I didn't think that I would be coming here to this meeting to speak to council, but feel it's time there is a need for more unity amongst the community to stop some of the madness that has been in the spotlight over the last year or so. I've read all 120 pages of this report, and some of the key aspects of this report I would like to identify as follows. Page 6 of the report states 20 different pathways. To me, it was more of a rinse and repeat. These so-called pathways in the report don't even identify any trigger points that the report recommends that are the points to take action. So in essence, I find it rather ambiguous in content. One of the comments I did notice that they said in the report on page 6 that there needs to be a highlighted need for more community engagement. So they've even identified the lack of community engagement. Also on page 6, excuse me, clause 4.2, the uncertainty of evidence and impact in a 100-year perspective. They also state this in the report, uncertainty of evidence. It also states on page 9, concerns the project may impact on insurability of private property and state's insurance industry undertakes its own research to monitor risk. Yes, they do. Reports like this that are being tabled are the sort of reports that the insurance industry will look at and make risk-averse decisions based on that, which means the rate increases and insurance increases for the homeowners in those areas that are identified on this report. Page 38, methods needed to identify risk are still being developed. So in other words, they're even saying in this report that the science isn't settled. Page 38 states this. Page 38 also states significant retreat in sand north of Paraparaumu. It also states that at some same page that it's not able to consider detailed analysis of groundwater response. So that's a statement in their report that they've put and highlighted in the report, but they can't even recommend analysis of it. The water north of Paraparaumu is because there's a stream, and it was also identified in a recent newspaper article, and the people around that area said this should not be attributed to climate change, but the movement of streams, which they do in a natural course of things over years. Page 53 states one must ensure council not locked into the pathways of this report. So they're not even saying you should recommend it or be involved in it and lock it in. 59, early establishment of marketing essentially being presented with one form of information from consultants and scientists that were presented to them, presenting one narrative. Page 64 of the RAA and PAA have similar feature to Queen Elizabeth Park. Queen Elizabeth Park is managed by Greater Wellington Regional Council and is currently under managed retreat strategy. So Wellington Regional Council is already moving on the kind of guidelines within this report without the report even being established. 68 uses Jacobs as extreme modelling. My time is up. Is that my buzzer? Okay, I'll just finish off here.
Finish the thought you're on. That's fine.
Is that okay? Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Page 67 also acknowledges much of the community is unaware of this plan. It would appear that the consultation has been taking place has produced a report with little of no substance. It has produced a report based on around $4 million price tag, and I believe that some of it is even more has gone into this project. This one page here, if this was a report, would cost around $25,000. So if we looked at that per page, $25,000 for one page with little or no substance. I find it absolutely obscene that the ratepayers' money has been spent in this way and is unacceptable. May I remind you, councillors, that you are elected to do the best for your community, and it seems to me that councillors get hoodwinked by consultants and office staff working within council institutions. And this is not just happening here in this region, but also around the country. You are told to do this and do that, and you can't do this and that in the directions you are heading. You need to start listening to your constituents and not the people that have a full-time job within the council chambers, because unlike you, they have a full-time job. However, you, every 3 years, you are voted in and out by your actions, and you will be voted out if your actions are not for the best interests of your community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dean. We've got a question from Councillor Wilson.
Yeah,
Keep it to questions,
Yeah,
please.
thanks for that, Dean. Assuming you're not going to charge 25,000, can we get a copy of your?
Of
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Yeah, certainly. I can do that. No
Brilliant.
problem at all.
Cool.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for your time. No more
Great, thank
questions?
you.
Sorry,
Yep.
just a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So, thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Butler.
Harris, for talking. Were you aware that the QE Park is not actually under this report at all?
Yes, I did.
And so,
But it
Greater-
states that it's under managed retreat.
yeah, but Greater Wellington have decided that by themselves.
Yes,
They're
I
not
understand
taking
that.
this
Yeah.
as that. Yeah, cool, just checking.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, good to have that clarification. Thank you. Great, thanks, Dean.
All right. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Sean Rush. Now, I've got here Public Interest Law and Science Initiative. Are you representing an organisation today?
It is actually, yeah.
Yeah, so 5 minutes then.
Yeah, well, I haven't really prepared much, but well, first of all, I want to say to you, Your Worship, thank you very much for coming to that community meeting a few weeks ago. You got a bit of a hard time. I thought you did really well. Really appreciate it. So well done to
Appreciate
you.
that, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, my name's Sean Rush. I am founder of the Public Interest Law and Science Initiative. And that's come about as a consequence of my background. I'm a lawyer by background, but I've also got a master's in climate change science and policy. And I've been trying to bring these things together with some folks in the different communities. My time as a Wellington City Councillor introduced me into the policy making process. I was disappointed to see there that sometimes the data that councillors were being given was not up to date or accurate. And sort of that led me through to a position where I felt that maybe there was a good need for a not-for-profit to actually try and champion some of the best available science to folks like you, and especially in, I suppose, in the climate space. We do see there's a political narrative, which I think we're all aware of, and then there's the underlying science, which often is not disclosed to you as decision makers. I just want to start off by saying congratulations to the CAP team for their report. I confess I haven't had a chance to read the whole of it, but one thing I did notice was missing was a problem definition. So if you actually go back to time, as I have, to the 50s and 60s and onwards, you can see that the coast around the Kapiti, and particularly where my place is on Otaki Beach, is actually accreting closer and closer to Australia. And there's a photograph, an aerial photograph in my written submission, which should be available to you, which shows that actually back in the late 50s, the beach was right where my house currently is. So there was a real coastal inundation problem back then. The other interesting thing that you might not be aware of is that sea level as measured by the Wellington Harbour tide gauge, which has been used as our default surveying marker here in the Kapiti coast since the 1950s. It actually shows that sea level has fallen since 2016. So there's a big peak in 2016 that was resulting from the El Nino weather system at that time, plus also the Kaikoura earthquake. But Kaikoura eventually actually lifted Wellington and a lot of the Kapiti coast up as well. So actually, you look at the coastal inundation problem and you realise that actually we're in a much better position today than they were in the 1950s, where the beach was closer, the sea was higher. you know, I guess if we were to put in place the sort of restrictions that people are talking about in terms of development back in the 50s, then a whole lot of housing in the Kapiti Coast would never have happened. And a lot of families, a lot of memories, a lot of communities would never have happened. So that's just a bit of a caution about where this might be going. One of the things which has been mentioned, and I've done a lot of work on the use of climate models for scenario planning, and I do agree that the use of the high-end models has now been walked away from by the IPCC. Martin Manning should know this. The IPCC climate modelling community had a meeting in Bangkok last year that was all written up, and now those high-end models, which appear on, I think, page 26 of the report, you can see there's models that are above the SSP 2-4.5 have now been walked away from as being unlikely. Under the legislation, of course, we need to use likely models. You know, we can build in some buffer, no question about that. But actually, in my submission, my written submission, I go through a lot of scientists who have publicly gone into the peer review saying these models are implausible, unlikely to happen, should only be used for academic purposes. Professor Dave Frame, IPCC lead author, former lecturer of mine, described in relation to an Auckland planning decision that the high-end model was one that no one believes. Greg Bodecker, who's a scientist, independent scientist, works on that IPCC modelling team. He and I had an exchange where he said, you know, you wouldn't use that high-end modelling. Why would you do that? For what purpose? So I do think that that needs to be looked at in a lot more detail. I suppose I'm just going to conclude by saying, you know, this has been quite a polarising debate, and part of that's been driven, frankly, by the refusal of scientists who are at the heart of some of the modelling to actually engage. As of yesterday, I was emailing one of my former professors at Vic, and he came back with a very irate answer saying, you know, can you stop this? I said, look, let's meet. Come on, let's meet. And he just came back and said, no. Martin, who's online, I extended a public invitation for you to meet with me so you can talk through. I did what you're supposed to do, which is an academic paper that got published by the Geoscience Society of New Zealand in March. It's never been, no one's ever questioned it, no one's criticised it. It backs up something that a more accredited scientist had done about Auckland not sinking either. And so it's been a lot of frustration for me to sit there going, well, I'm getting messages from different scientists around New Zealand saying that the ground doesn't sink the way it's been portrayed it has been. And I also see a tide gauge which tells me quite reassuringly that we're nowhere near the peak of 2016. And yet no one in the climate science fraternity will say, Sean, you've got it wrong, come into the office and let's have a chat. And as a consequence, we end up in this, we're both two echo chambers not talking to each other. That's very frustrating. So I would like to encourage a better dialogue between all the groups to try and flush out where do we agree? And maybe we can then maybe start thinking about, well, finessing those areas where we don't. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Yeah, nice problem definition and also some solutions, which we appreciate. Thanks. I've got a question from Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Just a question. You've obviously got a wealth of knowledge from your council days in Wellington and as your scientific. So what do you see the potential risks of basing our planning on high emission scenario that's increasingly being seen as improbable?
Oh, I think you'll find that the adaptation costs will go up, so you are unnecessarily building in resilience for an event that isn't going to happen. I take your point. I mean, you know, and as I say earlier, if we'd taken that sort of position in 1950s, you know, a whole lot of housing would never have happened. And, you know, one of the things that councillors are urged to do under the Local Government Act is plan for the future, and you know we need more housing. So if you're going to use an unlikely scenario, which is going to prevent you building in accessible places that are cheaper to build in, then you'll be defeating the purpose of the Local Government Act, I suppose. Do you get what I mean, Glenn?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate your input today. Thanks a lot.
Was happy to help.
Donald Carter is next. Welcome, Donald.
Hi. Yeah, thank you very much for making the opportunity. My name is Donald Carter. I've lived in the Cavity area for about 10 years. I've actually have extensive. Sorry, I do stammer, and these sort of situations bring it out, I'm afraid. I've actually do have I do have extensive knowledge of resource management. I've had senior positions in the Hauraki Catchment Board, the Waikato Regional Council, and both local and international experience in environmental management and resource management. It is well accepted that the world is currently in a warming phase, and has been recognised since about the mid-1800s, when it was observed that the glaciers in the Alps were actually receding. This led to the hypothesis that carbon dioxide was actually the main cause of the problem as a result of industrialisation. However, at the same time, although the world is actually warming a little bit now, we are emerging from a mini ice age from the late 1300s to about the 1840s, and before that there was a medieval warm period in between about 750 and 1100. It must be realised that carbon dioxide is not the main driver, as recent data actually tends to suggest that temperature is rising ahead of the increase of carbon dioxide. From a biological point of view, which is part of my background, this is perfectly logical for the simple reason that as the temperature rises, respiration rises, and for every 10 degrees increase in temperature, respiration doubles. And as you all know, plants utilise carbon dioxide as the primary source of its as a food in terms of photosynthesis, which is the opposite of respiration. Just moving on to the models which have been used, and Sean has already expressed the other concern that the extreme models are no longer valid, and he's also talked about the tidal gauge. It's really important that that models should not be used for planning purposes, and the Ministry for the Environment has also noted that the 8.5, which was used by Jacobs and adopted by the CAP team, could be used as a stress test, but only as an indication of the absolute worst, maybe situation which could actually happen. That can't be 3 minutes already.
I'm afraid it is, but just keep going. That's fine.
Okay.
Take your time.
There's a recommendation us in the report that there should be ongoing monitoring, and us in the report on page 116 and 126 of the agenda. It's important that an integrated monitoring program actually be set up to calibrate and determine which of the models which are indicated on page 26 are actually utilised, and to facilitate this, the community can be directly involved using the experience so the Murray River based in Australia, where they've actually involved the community in monitoring, and also partially established in a number of schools in New Zealand through the Enviro Schools program, where you can monitor flood events, inundation caused as a result of rainfall, groundwater monitoring, and water table heights. I do note that on page 30 of the report and 40 of the agenda, that there's an indication about local flooding in Waikanae in 2021, and the remedy was not. I was actually cleaning the drains, which actually, I might remind Council, became your responsibility after '91 when the drainage boards and the local drainage districts were dissolved. And those issues also can be seen in Peka Peka and the lowlands of Otaki. The last matter of the report is that it states that the community has been highly engaged in Tukutai Kapiti. That is totally not right, and Mr. Butler is certainly aware of our approaches, and the Otaki community is still waiting to actually have a discussion about this. It would be helpful if the council was to clearly communicate issues and their potential effects. And this could be done when the quarterly rate demand goes out, so that people actually know what's going on. And the newsletter needs to be entirely in English. I would actually mention that if you mention the name Tukutai Kapiti, most of the community haven't got a clue what it means. There should be clear communications to actually maintain good lines of understanding with the community. One or two other points, but we can reserve those. And the same observation is that councillors, you're elected by the community, council staff, you're paid by the community, and the councillors expect up-to-date, good reasons, alternatives in terms of policy direction and policy making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, because I'm not quite sure if I heard it, but what did you want entirely in English?
Nobody. Well, if I ask the average person in Otaki,
Yeah.
Excuse me, I was brought up in Rotorua, that is Te Araha, that is the Arawa tribe, and they would say Otaki. So please don't correct me on my pronunciation in Maori. Thank you.
I just
Sorry,
would.
I'm not sure that Councillor Wilson got an answer to his question.
No, he didn't. So there was an interjection on my left.
No, that's okay. I just would make the observation, though, that as you're aware, Otaki or Otaki, and like Waikanai and Paraparaumu and Kapiti itself are not English words, and you couldn't have any kind of report that leaves them out.
Refrain from debating with the presenters, please. My apologies for that, Donald. Thank you for your presentation today.
I understand.
We're not here to argue with you. We're here to listen to you. So
No,
sometimes it's tempting.
if it could be stated as a coastal management plan, hazards and objectives would help the community understand what that word is getting at. That's my only point.
I think your message around full, clear communication that's understandable by people is well taken. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
and your
much.
other points as well. John Andrews. Thanks, Donald.
Mayor, councillors, thank you very much.
Kia ora anō.
Before I start, I just wanted to extend on a couple of Sean's points, which there are so many mistakes in this report. It's just incredible. There are, I'm not going to go into the detail, but I'm going to use one because it's important. The tidal gauges in Wellington were misrepresented in this report. They said that the sea level was rising, and in actual fact it was falling. It fell, in the 1855 earthquake, it fell, it was considered to be about 400 millimetres. So please, that science is just, the reports by Tim Stern at Victoria and GNS, supported by the Swiss research, shows that the land in Kapiti is actually rising. It's not falling. If you can imagine, the Pacific tectonic plate is advancing at 400 millimetres a year. That's almost, 40 millimetres. It's almost 2 inches. It's forcing up like a wedge underneath the southern part of the North Island, forcing it up. It's sliding underneath the Australian plate with a crumple zone out in the Tasman Sea, which is forcing that up. It's not subsiding. I mean, does everyone understand that? Very simple. That was school. Anyway, okay. The climate adaptation process is not passed into law and is a policy only. The CPS, the DOC and MFE guidance, CPS 2010, is non-statutory, is discretionary, and not enforceable in ratepayers. Full stop. At the 20th of May meeting with the Mayor and Deputy, I advised that the Council is open to legal liability for the action of placing that second round of qualifications on the LIM reports for ratepayers. Now, you may claim legal privilege that you're not required to disclose that to the ratepayers, but we paid for it, and you will disclose it, and it will be done through the Auditor General, okay? It's actually, the figure is closer to $5 million for the cost of this report over the 4 years. It's an exaggerated report. Worst case scenarios and the terms of reference were not provided for, while they were provided for the CAP advisory panel, they were not provided for Jacobs. I've actually read the financial stuff on that report, and on Appendix 13, there is $4.4 billion. The total cost at the worst case scenario is $4.4 billion. That's $175,000 per ratepayer unit, and it's over approximately 2,552 properties affected. Now, that updates what was not released in the long-term plan, and may I please state that you are not an insurance company, and the ratepayers are not your your insurance levy providers. You are not in that business. It is not your business. With regard to that, the funding of your possible solutions for the $4 billion, you have not got enough leverage. You will never ever fund that. You cannot manage the $300 million of debt you've got now. And look what you're doing in the last a few weeks ago with what you're charging ratepayers. So you cannot manage that kind of debt funding, and you won't get that kind of debt funding. You know, you would just basically bankrupt the whole region. I think I'd probably better stop there because it's a bit emotive. Sorry.
Any questions? There don't seem to be any. Thanks, John. Thanks for your input today. Ian Harrison. Welcome.
Thank you.
If we could try and keep to the 3 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
I will.
I know I've set a precedent for going over time, but just if we could make a bit of an effort to be as brief as possible. Thanks.
So my name's Ian Harrison. I'm a resident of Waikanae Beach. My background is I'm an economist. I spent a good period of time with the Reserve Bank doing large-scale risk modelling and risk model validation. So, and plus, since then I've been a private contractor, and I've done a lot of work on climate change and the economics of climate change. So I wrote a report on this matter that went to, it was presented at the community meeting about, was it 4 or 5 weeks ago? The council's received a copy. So just to, since then, that formed part of my submission to the Select Committee on Climate Change Adaptation, and I will be presenting there. So the report itself, I had to choose two things because I've got 3 minutes. One, the multi-criteria decision analysis that underpins the analysis is not fit for purpose. Second, there was a cost-benefit analysis done, and that gives you some pretty good clues about why premature evacuation is not a it has no sound basis in policy. If you go to Waikanae Beach and Otaki, did I get that right? The benefit cost ratios are 0.01 and 0.03 respectively. Now, you don't have to get the economics precisely right to know that there's something very wrong with recommending managed retreat this century. It's just wrong. Now, where do we go from here? I got into this thing very late, just by accident, and I didn't have a chance to read everything, and a lot of it wasn't available. The risk analysis, risk assessments only became available on the 30th of May. It extends to 1,040 pages. I scanned some of it, and it deserves a full assessment. So what I intend to do is to do a full assessment in a validation sense of all of those documents, but particularly the economic modelling produced by Jacobs. Now, I would like to do that with the cooperation of the council, and particularly I need that economic model. And just to check it, these are complex models. They need to be validated. It's not enough just to go out there and get another consultant who'll write 2 pages seems okay to us. You need to get into the heart of the model. So I've done a lot of that, and just from a helicopter view, it doesn't seem too hard. It's just built on an Excel spreadsheet. But I intend to do that, and as I said, I'd much prefer to have the cooperation of the council rather than do it the hard way. Now, just a brief word on insurance. I had a bit to do with that at the Reserve Bank, and the lessons you get from that is they will charge you as much as they can get away with. And the Reserve Bank, when it did its 2018 report, this is an internal report on climate change risks. It says there's no risk to the financial system, but the biggest risk is that insurers will use it as an opportunity to overcharge. Thank you. Was that about 3:20?
You did very well. You got a lot in too. I've got a question from Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for coming in. I am interested to know which community meeting that you presented your model to, and whether or not we could have a copy of that, please. Sorry, your report, and whether we could have a copy of that, please.
That was the big one at Southwoods.
Okay, I was
and
away
I
at that
believe
time.
the council was given copies.
Okay,
So staff have a copy. They're happy to share it amongst councillors.
thank you, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just a quick question. First of all, thank you for that offer. We had the same thing this morning. We're blessed in our community to have people of enormous skill who are prepared to give up their time for things. What is it that you would need from council for the financial modelling?
They have built a model. I need that model.
All right.
That's the Jacobs model. You should have full access to it. If you don't, then you've done your contracts the wrong way. You need to know what's underneath that.
Cool. Thank you.
So yeah, I've just been. I think you have a catch up with council staff coming up. So hopefully
right.
that information will be made available to
Yep.
you. Yeah, great.
Now, I can't put a time limit on that. I'm like Sean. I'm finishing my Masters in Climate Change Science and Policy. I'm going after the brand. So, but the sooner we can get on to this, I think there are really interesting general issues that would be general to the wider New Zealand community. There are a lot of people in your situation trying to figure this thing out. And if you look at my website, tailrisk.co.nz, I like to think that I can present complicated economic concepts in stuff that the average intelligent person can read.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Shelley Daigle, is that how you pronounce it? Kia ora, welcome.
Kia ora. I'm not going to be able to rush what I have to say. English is my second language.
Okay, take your time.
If I rush, it's all going to be mumble jumble. I was up at 3 o'clock this morning, checking to see if I was over the 3 minutes. I've reduced my report in half, so let's give it a go and see if I can beat the 3 minutes.
Okay, your time starts now.
I'm here to speak as a ratepayer. Very few in the community have the ability, the time, the courage, or the awareness to be here. Right next to the rates increase, this is probably the most important topic to take place in this community right now. I've lived in Paekākiriki since 1992, and I've loved it. I've loved it here. I've loved it on the Kapiti Coast. I've loved the environment. However, in the last little while, I've opened my eyes to a few things, particularly the two topics that I rate very high, and I'll just carry on. Right next to the rates increase, and this one, they're the two topics that worry me the most. We are facing an unprecedented time with the proposed long-term plan and the proposed unaffordable rates increase of 17% plus for year one. I have learned through the people around me of the cost of the Coastal Advisory Panel. That for me is alarming. I also was aware and alarmed at the total pathway costs projected by CAP that span the next 100 years, and that's been mentioned. These were displayed at a drop-in session in Paekākiriki, and they were quite alarming. I noticed that these costs were not included in the CAP's final recommendation report. Our council is already over 220 million in debt. I'm not too sure where it's at the moment. How can we afford this? Based on climatic events or changes that may or may not happen in 50 to 100 years' time, because the reality is, according to CAP, we have no way of precisely predicting the future. These words in the report caught my eyes. Deep uncertainty around future sea level rise. I'm not too sure what page that was on. I'm going to cut back quite a few paragraphs here. Oh boy.
Just take your time.
Yeah.
Complete what you've got to say.
There needs to be more debate on this subject, as I can see that this is a continuing story. In some of my conversations with councillors here, I was told that the council will have to be very careful and look at all information presented, be open-minded, which includes the long-awaited report from Waikato University and other information received from various community groups and surveys. I hope those conversations take place. On the subject of community engagement, I would like to acknowledge the Raumati Community Board for having organized and facilitated the best public meetings I have attended with CAP and the public with record-breaking Q&A sessions. Thank you. However, my perspective, and for many others, the most important challenges we face today would be the cost of living crisis, our dwindling energy supplies, and increases in rates and insuring costs towards our hard-earned properties. I rate these higher than the Council's climate emergency and those millions spent on the CAP project. As a semi-retired person, in the next year, I will face a 17% plus rates increase alongside an 18.5% increase in my house insurance premium. So therefore, that's what I'm concerned about as a ratepayer. I think we've lost the focus, and we're expanded in areas such as climate, health, social, education, and culture, and our debt, it keeps going up. So in conclusion, I hope that common sense prevails in identifying what is required, investing and maintaining key infrastructure, as we always have. I'm just going to try. I am concerned also around real-world effects with what's taking place around the value of our houses and properties, and also the increase in insurance. A Paikakiriki neighbor told me recently that an insurance company declined insuring his property because it's a tsunami zone. He lives on Wellington Road. We are hearing this more and more. 2 more lines. To finish off, I am greatly reassured when I look at the certificate of title of our property, which sits on sand dunes of varying heights and has dodgy retaining walls. Many of you here will know what I mean. The ownership history of my property goes back to the 10th of July, 1930, nearly 100 years ago, and surprise, surprise, it's still there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Are there any questions? There don't appear to be any. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks for allowing me to speak way over my time.
No, no worries. No, it's all important. Quentin.
That's horrific. Thank you very much, Janet and councillors, for giving us the opportunity to speak today. I've been involved in the coastal planning arena here in Kapiti for 20 years. In 2004, John Lumsden produced his report on coastal hazards to KCDC. Mayor Alan Milne and his council then sent it out to the community to workshop, and it ended up with a coastal strategy of 2006, which had the buy-in of the community. Since then, we've seen 2 further iterations on coastal hazards by this council. 2012, where, as I would put it, the council attempted to impose conditions on its community. 2022-24, where council mandated committee, CAP, has now produced its final report. Today you've witnessed your Kapiti community explaining the errors and mistakes in the final CAP report. The opportunities for feedback by the community on the draft were limited, rushed, and when feedback was considered by CAP has offered criticisms rather than addressing the issues. KCDC has spent 8 years since 2016 getting to this point, but is still not listening to its community. We can see that staff recommended that you receive this report rather than accepting, as was the original intention, and I was intrigued with Chris's introduction this afternoon. I thought, yes, let's listen. What I did not hear was how the staff were going to use either the CAP report or the Jacobs report. And I think that is the issue you as councillors have. I have sent you proposed motions, which, okay, you've got perfect reasoning not to accept them, and as a method of trying to control a narrative. But I think you could have problems by opening this can of worm by receiving this report. That is my opinion. So the problem's not going to go away. As shown in the staff report to this issue at clause 17.6, CAP is recommending KCDC staff use their report not only for KCDC work, including a plan change, but also for regional council work regarding planning. So it's there in black and white. We can see it. And that is by receiving it and not putting any constraints on its usage, that is what you're going to be doing, and we in the community can see that. You, as our elected representatives, are endorsing this report, as well as the underlying Jacobs report, as you have put no controls over the staff use of these reports. This will denigrate into round 2 of the 2012-2014 coastal hazards fiasco, ably led by KCDC. Your responsibilities are to our district, to our community, and to the council. It would appear that you're only prepared to consider the council's position. The dereliction of duty and care to the Kapiti community has been noted today. So I hope you take note. Finally, I'd like to table the motions that I have sent to the Mayor and to every individual councillor earlier this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Quinton. Any questions? Don't appear to be any. Thanks, Quinton.
Thank you.
Salima Padamzi. Salima, are you speaking on behalf of crew today or as an individual?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most of my members are here today anyways.
Great. We have 5 minutes then.
Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to this report. I represent Coastal Ratepayers United, the Kapiti residents most affected by sea rise policies. We are concerned about climate change more than most. We want the council to get it right. As Quinton Poole just said, this is only an advisory board, and the report should not be given any legal or policy standing. We take this stand because of the many flaws in the reports, flaws that we, the Coastal Ratepayers United, have previously noted. First, the report is flawed scientifically because it relied on the Jacobs report commissioned by the council, which was not a risk assessment as recommended by the New Zealand government. Instead, it is only a vulnerability and susceptibility report, which relies on extreme modeling that international experts say is implausible. It should not be used for planning purposes by local authorities. We beg you, councillors, to think seriously about what is best for Kapiti and not simply cherry-pick the worst-case scenario. The report is flawed in misinterpreting the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. In particular, it failed to grasp the necessity of identifying and managing the likely scenario, which means a likely scenario for our coast. The report is also flawed in the lack of community engagement. There was no chance for the public to be heard. Our Kapiti Coast public with all the local knowledge and expertise that we have. Some groups were specifically excluded from offering their views. You probably saw and heard the media reports on the so-called public meeting where the chair of the panel shouted down to people who challenged the scientific basis and called them conspiracy theorists. Instead of community engagement, this report's process was more like community disengagement. Fortunately, this was always called an advisory committee, which means no one needs to take their conclusions seriously. Instead, councillors need to do your homework on behalf of the residents you represent. Council never vested the advisory committee with any statutory authority under the Resource Management Act. The committee's mandate did not encompass providing expert perspectives on policy matters. Therefore, its viewpoint regarding adaptation strategies should not influence any deliberations involved in formulating a coastal hazard section of the district plan. It's unfortunate that this advisory committee cost ratepayers more than $4 million, but Coastal Ratepayers United's position is that council cannot rely on this report for anything, especially given its flaws in science, local engagement, and coordination with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. For your information, CREW has secured funding from our membership and engaged Waikato University experts to undertake a coastal hazard risk assessment in compliance with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. I have tabled the terms of reference for the assessment, and despite the report still being in the finalization stages, I've also tabled a summary of the work completed thus far. I've also tabled crew submission to the inquiry in climate adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Salima. Any questions? We've got a couple of questions for you. First is Councillor Watson. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, for that, Selena. The Waikato University paper, it's been peer reviewed by Vic, right?
Well, we haven't gotten that far. We're still waiting for the finalization of the report.
Okay. Is there any sort of indications around a timeline on that?
I can't say it. They're having problems with the Jacobs report because we've asked them to peer review it, and they're just coming up with one fishhook after the other, and it's taking a longer time than we expected.
Okay, that's cool.
So I just got a follow-up question to that. So the information that you sent through refers to the Waikato University report. So you
that's the
clearly
summary of what we have to date.
Okay.
It's not finalized yet.
Okay, so you already have an initial review report, though. Are we able to see that?
Well, I
At
gave
some
you a
point?
summary. I sent it to you. I sent it to Anna.
Yeah, I've got it in front of me.
Yeah.
Your summary of the report.
Yeah.
Are we able to see the original document?
It's not ready.
So what are you summarising?
So this is
I'm
summary of what we
confused.
have of the third iteration that they've done. So they're still reviewing it. They're still going over it. So we asked for them to give us something that we could provide to you today.
Right.
And that's what we got, the summary that to date they have presented.
So what you've summarised in your submission is the incomplete piece of work which hasn't been peer reviewed. Is that
Not
what you're
yet,
saying?
no, that's correct.
Great.
It remains
Okay.
incomplete.
Great, thanks for that. So we can take that as a bit of a caveat on what you've
Yeah.
said in that page.
Perfect.
Mr. Butler? Oh no, Glenn Cooper. Sorry, got the wrong line.
Thanks, Salima. We've heard other speakers talk today about adaptation and a couple weeks around adaptation. Your organisation obviously has a wealth of knowledge in the planning and the RMA sort of space. Is adaptation a statutory requirement of the council or not?
It is not. But if that's council's position, maybe they could educate us and send us the legislation that they're relying on for that.
Okay. So your view is that we shouldn't use caps for district planning purposes? Is that what it-
I'm not saying that. It was actually in an email that was sent by your CEO on the 30th of August, which says, coastal adaptation areas are not hazard areas, nor are they relevant for district planning purposes.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
No? Anybody else? Thanks for your presentations, Lima. Thanks for your ongoing
Thank
work
you.
on this issue. It's been ongoing. Okay, so I'm just checking in. Is there anybody who intended to speak in public speaking who hasn't had a chance yet? Just making sure we haven't missed anybody. Dale, come up.
After listening to so far what I've heard,
So Dale, you have to come and speak into the microphone if you want to say something.
a bit slow on it because I'm getting old. But at the end of the day, after listening to so far,
Sorry, Dale, wait till you're in front of the microphone, please. We actually do have a councillor online. Sophie Handford has joined us online, so we want to make sure that the elected members hear what you have to say.
thank you. I have thought about putting in a submission, but after seeing what I see, just even it's not really up to council's decision. It should be central government making this decision. They are responsible, basically, where you go. In my view, this should be scrapped and all put your submissions and hear from, and there should be some MPs that will take it up. The responsibility is going to affect every one of us in the long term. Our rates, insurance, everything. How do you think the community can afford it? It's, to me, when you put something up, there's another inflation. It keeps on going up and up. You're pushing people out of the area that can't afford to live here. Particularly, you know, I mean, you've got all the credits that you give to the community. But my family's been here 100 years, basically near enough in one place. It's not subsiding, it's going further out to Kapiti Island. Now, how can you accommodate these properties that are increasing the value, going out? Individually, a lot of ways, it should be categorised in areas which are subsiding. And, I just think that there needs to be a real good look at this. In my view, local council can't make that decision. It should be central government doing it. And that's where it comes from my angle. At least you'll know what you're talking about, where you're getting a proper answer, not hidden behind something that you don't know anything about. Now, with all the amount of health issues that I've had, and I've had plenty, and there's 2 or 3 editors will write a book on issues that I have put myself out there to make people realise. And that is one of the biggest things we have is debt. Debt is enormous. Where are we going on that?
So, Ms. Dale, if you wouldn't mind sticking to the items that are on the agenda today.
Well, it surrounds that. It surrounds it.
Yeah.
The whole issue.
There's a
why you
wider
live in-
context around all of this for sure.
Sorry?
There's a wider context around all of this
I
for
realise
sure.
that, I know, but it comes to the basic end of where you're living, how much you can afford, and where you go. And, I should have really looked at this. It's not a matter of taking reverse mortgages and whatever you end up doing. But at the end of the day, if you want to live in the area, it looks as though you've got to pay for it. And I'm sorry, not at the council's, not at ratepayers' expense. Anyway, that's as far as I'll go.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions?
Thank God, no.
Oh, you made some really good points there, some of which
Don't
I'm
forget
sure we agree with.
I'm getting old, like everybody up here.
Thank you for your contribution. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break now because otherwise we might have to break halfway through the paper. So I prefer to take a little breather now and then we can dive into the report. So we'll come back just after past. Members of the public, feel free to stay if you'd like to,